Hello everyone, I'm Brazen Eagle and thank you for joining me here. So today, we have an important discussion to have regarding equality, equity, and race from this Breitbart article. Dartmouth professor says, create a mandatory white privilege class. Professor at Dartmouth College wants to create a mandatory course on white privilege for college students around the country. The professor Emily Walton argued in a recent column for USA Today that all college students should be required to take a course on white privilege. Walton, a professor of sociology, of course, at Dartmouth, currently teaches a course on white privilege. However, Walton claims that white students rarely enroll in the course. I wonder why. As a result, Walton claims that many white people go through life with racial blindness, a condition, according to Walton, that is marked by an inability to see one's own privilege. Really? Wow. Anyways, as it is now, students self-select into the course, and most who do are students of color. Because white students have managed to avoid critical discussions of race their whole lives before college, they tend to see racial and ethnic inequality as not their issue. Rather, it is generally the students who already have an inkling of racial injustice, who seek out more information, who challenge themselves to be uncomfortable every day in the process. It is also an injustice, though, that only these students take on the burden of learning about, critiquing, and challenging the system of oppression. Oh my goodness. In the column, Walton makes the case that requiring a white privilege course for all students would create informed citizens that are willing to fight for racial equity. Requiring a course on race and ethnicity for all college students would send the message that both the university and society value the kind of learning that produces informed and critical citizens for a world after graduation. It sounds like a lot of indoctrination to me. We can't just drift into racial equity with good intentions, nor put much hope in generational change. We need to actively, purposefully take the blinders off and re-educate people we don't want thinking wrong things. So, some professor wants more white people to enroll in a white privilege course. She wants it to be mandatory. Think about that. A mandatory white privilege class. Imagine if you're studying business or chemistry at a university and you are forced to take a class about white privilege and how whites are evil. This is communism masked behind sociology, and let me explain what I just said. So, it is the goal of a supposed communist state to ensure that everyone is equal, right? That's what socialism and communism ultimately want. And of course, equal means different things to different people, though. And just because white people have been the most successful race of people, I would say, in the past around 500 to 600 years, they generally have individually created the civilization that we have today. And now white people are being punished for the supposed sins of their fathers and some others. If you go back 1,000 years, you'd find that Middle Easterners, which are considered Asian, were quite a dominant force between the 8th century to the 14th century. Should descendants of the Middle Easterners acknowledge the actions their forefathers took in order to be successful and be punished for it? I think not. What this professor is teaching is that she, Emily Walton, much like almost all other professors, are demanding that we establish equality of outcomes no matter the price. Now, let me explain that sentence. Establishing equality of outcomes no matter what. So, what I mean is that generally, individual white people do have a sense or maybe a form of privilege. Some were born into great families, some not so. Some were born into middle-class families, some not so. Some were born into very wealthy families, others weren't. And you know what? With those past 3 sentences, you can replace white people with any other race. Some black people are born into great families, but many are not. Some Hispanics are born into extremely wealthy families, but some are not. Some Asian families have great social and familial connections, while others do not. Individually, we all have our different types of privilege, you could say. But sociologists and leftists are grouping people together in order to push their own narrative. I mean, look on screen, like the main image for this article. White silence is violence. Pound Black Lives Matter. Someone's pushing a narrative here. And of course, in order to achieve the communist goal of equality of outcomes, those who were successful in the past, their descendants must be punished in order to ensure that everyone equally fails together now, and that no one can be better than each other, except for those who are more equal than others. That's what these people are getting at. They want everyone to fail equally. They are envious at other people's success and want to drag down successful people. Just look at the word they used in this article here. Racial equity. Now, I've talked about equity on this channel before, and you will hear about it more and more in the future. That's why I'm bringing this up. I mean, this isn't a mainstream video that I'm sure most other people would cover, but I'm covering this because this is going to become more and more prominent as time goes on into the 2020s. The term equity. Equity in a social sense is supposedly the process of lifting up and improving the conditions of a mistreated minority. That sounds nice, but unfortunately, we must be realistic. Equity attempts to lift other people up, but ultimately, realistically, hurts the most successful people instead. And you might not even lift up the supposed mistreated minority. All you do that is guaranteed is to hurt the successful people. The most tangible example of social equity by dragging other people down to supposedly lift other people up is affirmative action in the United States. If you are a supposed minority, generally not white or even some Asians in the United States, you get a preferential status in employment and education. What this means is that you are being discriminated against based on your race. People who promote equality are actively discriminating against the successful people in our country. Doesn't matter your skin color. You could be white, you could be yellow. That's called Asian. They don't care. They hate successful people. Let that sink in. In order to achieve supposed social and economic equality of outcomes, the successful people are being harmed and discriminated against and being pulled down to an equally failed level. Now let's go back to the article over here. This college professor wants to have white students believe that their white ancestors are evil because they weren't people who believed in equality. That's pretty much it. It is their fault for the problems of the world. This professor, Emily Walton, wants her white students to believe that white people should be punished for building society. Do you know what happens when a society or civilization weakens itself and chooses to not fight back against idiots and the losers of the world? That society dies and gets conquered by other people. It's just animal instincts. Take out those who are weak. Should people acknowledge their status in the world and see how much they actually have? Yeah, people should. But people should individually, instead of being told by other people should embrace introspection. It can be such a great thing to realize that, hey, I'm actually doing okay. I'm not doing bad. I do have a sense of more well-being than other people. And that's not a problem. If you're better off than other people, you shouldn't feel ashamed for it. And that's what this college professor is trying to do. Shame other people for being successful. This professor is assuming that all white people generally are evil, and they need to be punished for their actions of their ancestors, which, of course, by doing this, you will kill society. Besides, I do have a question, though. We talk about white privilege, but what about people who are of mixed race? I think people maybe like Tim Pool's mixed race. What would he do? Would he have half white privilege and half Asian privilege? How would that work out? Should he be told he has privilege and should be punished for it? Regardless, though, there's many questions that will be asked and some answers will be given to further the steps of supposed equality of outcomes in the name of social justice, ultimately, though, called communism. But anyways, communist professors like this need to go, but until then, thank you very much for watching. I'm Brazen Eagle, and I hope you have a great, great day.